Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking on a book that is, well, it's astonishingly small, but it carries one of the heaviest prophetic weights in the entire canon.
It really does.
We're talking about the shortest book in the Old Testament, the single chapter Book of Obadiah.
Just 21 verses.
Exactly. But don't let its size fool you. It packs an absolute atomic bomb of history, geography, dramatic character flaws, and just massive cosmic prophecy.
It's a profound deep dive precisely because of its brevity. On the surface, it's just a message aimed at a small, ancient nation that, hasn't existed for 2 millennia Edom.
Right.
But Obadiah is using this very specific judgment as a kind of blueprint. He's showing us how divine justice operates, not just locally, but on a global scale.
Yeah.
It ultimately sets the stage for a coming eternal kingdom.
And that is the mission for you, the listener, today. To unpack this story of Edom, the descendants of Esau, we need to understand why this small, rocky nation became the metonymy for all of Israel's enemies.
That's such a key word, metonymy.
It is, this one focused idea standing in for a larger universal concept. We're going to trace how this incredibly focused prophecy of judgment just pivots directly into describing the ultimate future restoration of Israel and, well, the establishment of God's global rule.
And our sources for this, they force us to look critically at the historical context, specifically that really messy period of the 6th century BC Babylonian invasion, just to understand Edom's crime. But then they immediately expand our perspective, showing how this ancient event explains these overarching prophetic concepts like the day of the Lord. We're really connecting ancient history to the very end of time.
Okay, let's unpack this with a great initial fact drop, straight from the title itself. The name of the prophet delivering this message, Obadiah. It means servant of the Lord.
A remarkably fitting name, because the servant of the Lord is tasked with delivering a message about this rival group, the Edomites, who were fundamentally defined by their arrogant refusal to serve anyone.
Not their family, not their allies.
Not Israel, not their allies, and certainly not the Lord. Their whole national ethos was just self-exaltation.
So to really understand the intensity of this message, we have to start with the family rivalry. This is a tale of two mountains, but it begins with really a tale of two brothers who never reconciled.
That's right. We have to establish Edom's identity and its geography first. The Edomites were the descendants of Esau,
Jacob's twin brother.
his twin. And this relationship is absolutely crucial because it means Edom's later actions weren't just opportunistic warfare. No, this was an act of ultimate malicious betrayal against a blood relative.
They were kin.
They were kin, yet they acted like absolute strangers or, worse, predatory enemies.
And their identity, it's literally written into the landscape they lived in. The name Edom itself, it derives from a Hebrew root meaning red.
It does.
I understand this isn't just symbolic, right? It reflects the actual visual terrain where they lived.
Precisely. Edom was geographically situated to the south of the Dead Sea. It was centered around the region we know as Mount Seir, stretching down toward the Gulf of Aqaba.
Okay.
And this entire region is characterized by these deep, numerous rocky crags, canyons, and mountains just carved out of this intensely reddish sandstone.
So you can actually see it.
You can see it. Think of Petra, the famed rock-cut city. That was their territory. And the geography didn't just give them a name. It gave them ideal military and strategic advantages. They were essentially living in natural fortresses high up in the mountains.
And the sources refer to that location as their strength, which brings us directly to the core of their national character. Their outstanding flaw, what the prophet identifies as Zodon.
Zodon, pride.
Deep-seated pride. But this wasn't just ordinary arrogance, was it? It was like the engine that drove their foreign policy and their eventual destruction.
It was their downfall, yes.
Yeah.
We really have to spend some time on this word, Zodon. The sources reveal this powerful, almost violent imagery behind the Hebrew term. It comes from the verb vid, which means to boil up or to be overcooked. So you should picture water boiling fiercely under pressure in a cooking pot, overflowing the brim, violently thrusting itself up.
Wow.
That's how pride is pictured here, as an inner destructive pressure that just manifests in boastful, puffed-up arrogance that can't be contained.
A hollow bubble thrusting itself up. I mean, that visual definition is fantastic because it implies instability. Pride isn't a solid foundation.
No.
It's an unsustainable overflow. So how did that boiling pride, how did it manifest in Edomite policy?
Yeah, it led to a profound isolationism and self-sufficiency, and that's what fueled their betrayal. Because they were so geographically secure, they believed their prosperity was entirely self-generated.
Not a gift from anyone.
Not a gift. They didn't need alliances, they didn't need God, and they certainly didn't need their less fortunate relatives, Jacob or Judah.
Yeah.
Their pride made them dismissive of any claim other than their own self-interest. They saw Judah's suffering not as a crisis for family, but as an opportunity for expansion and scavenging.
And what's fascinating here is how this flaw seems to be generational. It wasn't just a contemporary political error. It was baked into their ancestry, going all the way back.
Absolutely. The same Hebrew root for pride for Zedon, it occurs 3 times in the Genesis account of Esau himself.
The man himself.
Right, when he's squandering his birthright, he comes in famished, demanding that famous lentil stew, which, by the way, was probably reddish, linking right back to the Edom name.
Ah, there's the connection.
There it is. He dismisses the birthright, the sacred promise, as totally meaningless because of his immediate physical craving. He treated something holy with absolute disdain.
So that ancestral flaw.
Yes, that prideful dismissal of spiritual and familial value in favor of immediate gratification, it was literally cooked into the national identity of Edom. Their arrogance was inherited, it was refined, and it was institutionalized.
And that arrogance was so deeply tied to their physical location, which that leads us right to the illusion of invincibility in Obadiah verses 3 and 4. They looked at their home, those high rocky cliffs, those deep hidden cities like Petra, and they just saw an unassailable fortress.
Their geography didn't just reinforce their pride. It created a profound spiritual deception. They resided in the safety of Mount Seir, believing their natural defenses were impenetrable.
Untouchable.
This is what the prophet means when he talks about their presumptuous hope deceiving them. They had the feeling of being completely secure. They literally thought, and the source material captures this boast perfectly, no one can bring me down to the ground.
It wasn't just a political boast.
Yo.
It was a geological boast. They were believing the Creator could not overcome the landscape he himself created.
The audacity is just astounding. They felt they were exempt from the normal rules of history, immune to judgment, simply because of their elevation.
So help us understand the divine rebuttal. How does Yahweh dismantle this geographical security blanket they've wrapped themselves in?
The divine reply just completely ignores their walls and their altitude. He tells them, even if you soared high like an eagle, or somehow managed to make your nest among the stars, which is a metaphor for the highest imaginable human achievement or refuge.
Right.
He says, I can bring you down even from there. It's an immediate, absolute promise. God is essentially saying, you pride yourself on your height, but you're only high relative to the ground. I am high relative to the stars.
So their pride was based on a complete lie, the belief that physical elevation could guarantee sovereignty. The sources describe it as God promising to burst their bubble.
And it's the perfect analogy for Zedon. The boiling pressure of their pride was contained within this hollow bubble of self-deception, which God promises to pop with the force of his judgment. Their self-exaltation will be met with inevitable divine deflation. It's a powerful metaphorical statement, you know. Any security built on human pride, no matter how physically imposing, is ultimately fleeting. Now we move from the internal character flaw, that boiling pride, to the specific crime that sealed their fate. And this betrayal, it occurred during a profound time of crisis for their kin, for Judah.
This is where we anchor the prophecy historically. We need to set the scene for you. The historical context is the 6th century crisis. While there might have been earlier conflicts, the severity of the language here, it points most clearly to one specific monumental event.
That event is the Babylonian invasion of Judah in the 6th century BC. It culminates in Nebuchadnezzar's brutal final siege and the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BC.
I mean, this was the moment of ultimate national devastation for Israel, and Edom's role in it. It was unforgivable.
They didn't just stand by and watch the tragedy unfold. The sources are clear that the Edomites actively assisted the Babylonian conquerors in the sack of Jerusalem. They saw Judah's vulnerability and chose to be collaborators.
Making this a heinous, malicious betrayal of relatives.
Think about the depth of that action. The Babylonians were strangers. They were foreign aggressors. Edom was family. Yet when the chips were down, Edom acted as the final predatory vultures, capitalizing on their brother's demise.
And Obadiah doesn't leave this crime vague at all. We get graphic details in the specific crimes against Judah in verses 10 through 14. He calls out their violence against her brother, Jacob. So what specific acts does Obadiah focus on?
The list of sins is specific, and it escalates dramatically. It moves from this kind of passive gloating to active slaughter. First, they simply stood aloof, while strangers took Judah captive and foreigners advanced to Jerusalem's gates.
So they just watched.
They just watched. They saw the suffering of their relatives and did nothing but gloat, probably saying, "We told you so," and finding satisfaction in their downfall. This is an act of just profound spiritual abandonment.
Gloating is terrible, but then it got worse. They transitioned into opportunism and material gain.
That's the second level. They looted their wealth and entered the gate of my people when the Judeans experienced distress. So they weren't fighting the invaders, they were scavenging the remains. They became accessory thieves, picking through the rubble of Jerusalem for anything of value after the Babylonians had broken the defenses.
But the truly heinous act, the one that really defines the unforgivable nature of their treachery, is detailed next. I want to spend a moment on the imagery of the fork in the road.
This is the centerpiece of the crime. It's just chilling. As the Judean fugitives fled Jerusalem attempting to escape the invading Chaldeans, the exhausted, the weak, the wounded, the Edomites met them at a critical juncture.
The fork in the road.
The fork in the road. This was likely the main route leading out of the city towards the wilderness. It was the last chance for escape and sanctuary.
And they turned that path of freedom into a trap.
Exactly. Instead of offering refuge or safe passage, they stood there to slaughter those trying to find freedom. Or they captured the refugees and delivered them back to the Babylonians, or held them for ransom.
Unbelievable.
They became collaborators, executioners, and slave traders of their own kin. That specific, brutal action, preying on the most vulnerable moments after a catastrophic defeat. That is why the prophetic consequence is so swift and so absolute.
What was it?
Because they violently slaughtered their relatives. Shame will cover you and you will be destroyed forever. The judgment is precisely commensurate with the crime.
It's the law of the harvest applied immediately. They thought they were being clever survivors, but they were actually planting the seeds of their own destruction. And what's fascinating is that the judgment for this betrayal is also structured to undermine the very things Edom prided itself on. Which brings us to the betrayal from within and without.
This is a perfect example of divine irony. Edom was known for having an enviable reputation for wisdom and counsel. The sources indicate that because of their strategic geographical location, sitting astride major trade routes, they were major communication hubs.
They were the nexus of the ancient world. They benefited from information gleaned through caravans going to and from powerful empires like Babylon and Egypt.
And even distant lands like Europe and India. They were globally connected and considered politically sophisticated and wise.
The smart ones.
They were the smart ones. But God promises to destroy this wisdom. He says the wise sages and advisors of Edom would be annihilated, and panic would grip their strongest warriors. The very source of their pride, their intelligence, and their reputation would be removed.
That's the judgment from within.
Right, the collapse of their intellectual and military confidence.
And the judgment from without, it mirrors their own crime, doesn't it? They betrayed Judah, but they, in turn, would be betrayed by the very people they trusted most.
The irony is just inescapable. Obadiah predicts that Edom's own allies and treaty partners would treacherously betray them. Those trusted friends would deceive them, overpower them, force them from their homeland, and plunder their hidden valuables.
Wow.
Edom had set an ambush for Judah, their brother, but their trusted friends would set an ambush for them. The treachery they practiced on family became the model for how their closest associates treated them.
They thought they were the ultimate geopolitical opportunists, leveraging power for gain, but their trusted relationships just used the same playbook against them.
Yeah.
So how did this play out historically? What was the historical outcome of this judgment against the nation of Edom?
Well, the historical record confirms a steep and permanent decline. Following the Babylonian period, Edom suffered repeated attacks, notably from the Nabateans, another group that leveraged the region's geography. And by 312 BC, Edom had ceased to exist as a sovereign nation, with its capital region falling definitively into Nabatean hands. The promise of shame and destruction was fulfilled geographically and politically. The Edomite state, built on pride and treachery, just vanished from the map.
But wait, I want to get a point of clarity here for you, the listener.
Yeah.
If the judgment was total destruction, how do we reconcile that with the fact that the people, the Edomites, continued to exist?
That's a crucial distinction. The nation, the political and geographic entity called Edom, was destroyed forever.
Okay.
The people, the descendants of Esau, that they continued to live. They became known as the Edomites, and they moved further west into the southern part of Judea.
Okay.
So while the state was gone, the line was not immediately extinguished. And this allows the antagonism to continue and fulfills the prophecy in a really interesting layer.
Yeah.
Their geographic security was gone, yet their shame continued through history, which we'll touch on later.
Okay, so we've established the history, the crime, and the immediate consequence. Now we shift scope entirely. Part 3 is where Obadiah takes this localized family feud and just elevates it into a universal cosmic principle of justice. Edom's fate becomes a mirror for all hostile nations.
This transition is the heart of Obadiah's message. Edom's specific treachery at the fork in the road is used to illustrate the principle of cosmic justice, which is encapsulated by the ancient law of lex talionis.
Let's define that clearly. Lex talionis is often translated as an eye for an eye, implying, equivalent retribution. But in Obadiah's context, is this strictly equivalent justice, or is it a kind of divinely magnified justice?
It is both, and that's the power of the paradigm. The direct mandate in Obadiah 1.14 is terrifyingly simple and universal. It says, "For the day of the Lord is approaching for all the nations. Just as you have done, so it will be done to you. You will get exactly what your deeds deserve."
So Edom's fate wasn't just revenge.
No, it was the establishment of a universal moral law. The principle is that actions, particularly actions of pride and oppression against God's people, they generate their own inevitable proportional consequence.
So the betrayal at the fork in the road, that localized disaster, it becomes the model for the global disaster that will befall every arrogant empire.
Exactly. The point is that localized disasters, like the ultimate fall of Edom, are not random acts of history. They are the footsteps of the Lord himself. They are signposts showing how God deals with nations built on self-serving pride, signaling his approach to set up the ultimate kingdom that will never be destroyed.
Edom is a cautionary tale written on the map.
That's a great way to put it.
And this expansion, it brings us to a major prophetic concept, defining the times of the Gentiles. Edom had their short-lived day, oppressing Jerusalem and gloating over their suffering. The prophets understood that all succeeding global powers would similarly have their day of oppressively dominating the Jews.
And this period is explicitly named in the New Testament by Christ himself as the times of the Gentiles in Luke 21.24. It's not just a historical observation. It's a specific prophesied era of global Gentile dominance.
Can you help the listener situate this on a timeline? I mean, when did this era begin and what defines it?
The sources define this period as beginning precisely when Nebuchadnezzar removed Israel's sovereignty in 586 BC. The very destruction that Edom helped facilitate was the action that ushered in this global era.
Wow.
And what defines it is that Israel is constantly being trodden down by the Gentiles. For the last, 2,600 years, Jerusalem and the Jewish people have lacked absolute, recognized, and sustained sovereignty. They remain subject to or surrounded by Gentile powers.
So Edom's treachery helped launch an era of oppression that continues, prophetically speaking, right up until the Lord returns. What is the endpoint of this era?
The endpoint is definitive. This era of Gentile dominance will only conclude when Jesus Christ returns to the earth in glory and restores Israel's complete eternal sovereignty. Until then, we remain within this vast historical stretch that Obadiah prophesied would eventually face judgment.
Edom's destruction was just the first wave.
It was the first wave, the assurance that the final global wave of judgment is coming.
And this final wave is described using some really potent imagery in this celebration and the destruction. Obadiah 1.16. How does the prophet characterize the nation's abuse of power during this extended period?
They are pictured as drinking continually on the holy mountain. They're celebrating their dominion over the Israelites to the point of delirium and self-intoxication. This speaks to a heedless, consuming pride that comes from believing they have finally won the historical struggle. They think they can stand on the consecrated ground of Jerusalem and celebrate their victory over God's purpose, believing their power is permanent.
The imagery of being drunk with power is so apt. It ties right back to the idea of Zadon, that boiling, unstable, intoxicating pride that overwhelms reason and morality.
Absolutely. When a nation is intoxicated by its own power and believes it is unassailable, it begins to act heedlessly, just like Edom did at the fork in the road. They are drinking so continually that they are blind to the approach of the day of the Lord.
But the judgment on these powerful, intoxicated nations is absolute. God promises to destroy them so completely that they will be as though they had never been.
That phrase, as though they had never been, it speaks to the absolute finality of it all. The sources stress that the nations and empires, as they presently exist with their structures of opposition and hostility, they will not exist in the same form and function once the millennium begins.
So their identities will be gone.
Their national identities and hostile Gentile-dominating structures will be utterly dissolved. While Edom suffered an earlier destruction, Obadiah spoke of all Gentile powers that dominated Israel. The lesson is that human empire, no matter how powerful or how ancient, is inherently temporary.
It's the ultimate connection. A localized disaster, Edom's fall, marked the footsteps of the Lord approaching to set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Edom, therefore, stops being just a nation and becomes that powerful metonymy for every proud, opposing global power that has ever existed or will exist.
After these severe pronouncements of universal judgment, Obadiah pivots entirely to a magnificent vision of restoration. Part 4 offers this powerful contrast between the complete prominent fate of the Edomites and the glorious expansive future of Jacob.
Let's analyze the contrast of futures. The judgment on Edom is complete. They will be destroyed like stubble burned by fire, and there will not be a single survivor of the descendants of Esau. I mean, the sources say this judgment is absolute in its finality.
It is the complete annihilation of the historic opponent. But this destruction, it only serves to highlight the fate of the righteous. The prophecy assures that on Mount Zion there will be a remnant of those who escape, and it will be a holy place once again.
The tables will be turned.
The tables will be definitively turned, and the oppressed will become the restorers.
The imagery is incredibly aggressive and protective here. The descendants of Jacob will be a fire, and the descendants of Joseph a flame. They will consume the descendants of Esau, Edom, like fire consumes stubble.
This is the great reversal of roles. Edom thought they were the predator, preying on the weak fugitives at the fork in the road. Now, Jacob and Joseph, representing the whole restored nation, north and south, they become the unstoppable purifying force.
Fire and flame.
The fire is consuming the easily flammable stubble, the hunters become the hunted, and the oppressed become the instrument of final justice.
But this restoration isn't just vague spiritual poetry. It is territorial and geopolitical, which leads us into possessing the promised land and defining the future map. Obadiah details exactly where the returning Israelites will settle and what strategic territories they will annex.
The detail here is stunningly specific and speaks to a massive expansion. The first move is a direct reversal of the historical oppression. The people of the Negev, the southern region of Judah, which Edom constantly raided, will take possession of Esau's mountain, Mount Seir or Edom.
What is the strategic significance of taking Mount Seir? Why that specifically?
Well, geopolitically, this gives them control over the King's Highway. That's the critical ancient trade route running north to south. By annexing Edom, they eliminate a massive historical security threat, and they gain control over vital commerce and movement between Arabia and the Mediterranean world.
So it turns an enemy stronghold into a security buffer.
And an economic asset, yes.
And the expansion continues into other traditionally hostile areas. The foothills people, those living in the lowlands toward the coast, will take possession of the land of the Philistines.
Annexing Philistia means securing the coastal plain. Historically, the Philistines constantly threatened Israel's western flank and controlled the Via Maris, the other great international trade route.
Okay.
So this act provides definitive, secure access to the Mediterranean and guarantees a secure western border, something Israel, almost never achieved historically. This isn't just territory, it's security and sovereignty.
And the formerly divided kingdoms are reunited, with the territories of the former northern kingdom Ephraim and Samaria also being included in this restoration.
Yes, the 12 tribes are brought back together, resolving the internal historical conflict that plagued them for centuries. And furthermore, the Transjordan region isn't forgotten. The people of Benjamin, a southern tribe, will take possession of Gilead, the land east of the Jordan River.
So it's a complete picture.
It ensures control of the entire area from the Jordan Valley eastward, rounding out the geographical claim.
And the vision also includes the return of exiles from distant places, proving this is a global regathering, not just a localized repatriation.
Absolutely. The exiles are returning from two widely separated locations. First, exiles of this fortress of the people of Israel will return and possess Canaan as far as Zarephath. Now, Zarephath is located north of Tyre in what is modern Lebanon.
So that's pushing the border way north.
It pushes the northern boundary significantly, far beyond the typical borders of Judea and deep into Phoenician territory.
And the second exile location is fascinating, Sepharad. The sources note this location remains a deep mystery. It could be Sardis in Turkey, or Media, or even Spain.
The uncertainty is actually prophetic in itself. Whether it refers to the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, or somewhere further east like Media or Turkey, the primary message is one of extreme distance.
It's about how far they've been scattered.
Precisely. The exiles of Jerusalem who are in Sepharad will return and occupy the southern portions of the land, specifically the Negev. This emphasizes the sheer global reach of the dispersion and the completeness of the repopulation and re-sovereignty across the entire promised sphere.
So this meticulous detailing of the map, it isn't just about drawing lines. It speaks directly to the unfinished conquest completed. What is the overarching significance of this complete territorial claim?
The significance is immense. Israel will, at this future time, conquer the land and subdue it completely. This fully realizes the expansive territory God had originally promised to Abraham centuries prior.
Genesis 13.
Right, Genesis 13.1417 speaks of this vast extent, from the Euphrates to the border of Egypt, a territory that was never fully realized historically, not even under David or Solomon.
So this future restoration will complete the work that Joshua began, but didn't finish when he initially led the Israelites into the land. The territorial promise, delayed by centuries of conflict, national failure, and Gentile oppression, will finally be realized under divine governance.
And that realization culminates not in the rule of a human king, but in the final climax, Yahweh's sovereignty. This is the ultimate, undeniable conclusion of Obadiah's prophecy, tying back the fate of Edom to the fate of the entire globe.
The message is clear. Edom, and by extension, all Gentile nations operating under the times of the Gentiles, will not prevail against the divine plan.
And the final word of the prophecy just drives this home in a monumental way. Then the Lord will reign as king. His kingdom will extend over the whole promised land, even the parts formerly occupied by historic, hostile enemies like Edom and Philistia. The prophecy ends with Yahweh as King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, dominating all the nations that once thought they were unassailable.
It's a remarkable trajectory for such a short book. From the petty, specific betrayal by a brother nation defined by Zadon, that boiling pride, to a universal judgment on all hostile powers, culminating in an eternal global kingdom where God's promises are finally and fully realized.
To quickly review the key takeaways for you, we define the Edomite character flaw as Zadon. That's that boiling, self-exalting pride tied to their seemingly secure geography.
We detailed the specific, unforgivable betrayal at the fork in the road during Jerusalem's destruction.
We established the principle of lex talionis, that cosmic justice requires the nations to reap what they sowed, and we saw the expansive strategic map of the future restoration where Israel will complete its conquest and secure its borders completely.
And we can't overlook the New Testament connection that confirms the enduring nature of this antagonism even after Edom ceased to exist as a political state. The people continued, rebranded as the Edomians.
That's right. Herod the Great, the king who reigned when Jesus was born and ordered the slaughter of the innocents, he was an Edomian.
Wow.
He and his family maintained that ancient, visceral opposition, ultimately trying to thwart the arrival of the promised king. They opposed Jesus Christ and his followers from the moment of his birth.
And just as Edom failed to destroy Israel completely at the fork in the road, Herod failed to kill the Savior in his infancy. The ultimate destruction fell upon the hostile power, whether that power was Edomite treachery or Edomian tyranny.
And this underlines Obadiah's final sweeping conclusion. No man-ruled empire, no matter how sophisticated or geographically secure, nor any nation of this world will endure forever. All will one day be merged into that eternal kingdom over which the Lord Jesus Christ will reign in solitary glory.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Since Obadiah predicts that every powerful nation of this world will eventually face this ultimate judgment and transition, what fundamental human characteristic derived from Edom's specific Zadon, that boiling, self-exalting pride tied to perceived geographic or resource security, do you observe today that is currently convincing powerful nations that they are, in fact, unassailable, untouchable, and exempt from history's ultimate judgment?
Something profound to chew on as you connect the cliffs of Mount Seir to the headlines of today and consider the ephemeral nature of earthly power.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.